Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm the Campaign Marketing Manager here at eLearning Brothers. Today, we're going to be talking about strategies to avoid a generation gap in your learning. It's going to be a really fun topic, and I'm excited to see what we're going to learn today. This session will be recorded. We will send a copy of it out as an email shortly after the session, so you can be checking that inside of your email. If you need to leave early, you can have access to it there. You can also share it with others who may find it valuable. And we're also going to include a handout in there. So do watch for that email later in the day, and we'll get that to you as quickly as we can. If you have questions during the webinar, we'll be ready to answer your questions using the questions panel. That's part of the GoToWebinar control panel there on the side. And it's just labeled questions. So please use that. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can. It looks like a couple of you have already found that. So please do use that, and that's how we'll participate several times throughout the session. If you haven't already, please feel free to check out our community, the Rockstars community. There's all kinds of good stuff there. There's tips, tricks, people ready to learn together inside of there. We have a section about e-learning development, e-learning design. We have sections about each of our tools, Lectora, the asset library, Rockstar learning platform. We also have sections about Articulate, Storyline, Captivate, iSpring, PowerPoint, other things. So it's just a great place to go and participate in an e-learning community. And now I'll get a link for that in the chat as well. All right, so we have a fantastic guest today. We have Andrea Maliska, the founder of Rebel Learn. Thank you for joining us, Andrea. We're very excited to hear what you have to say. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the screen and the time over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, you all should be able to see my screen now. Thank you so much, Andrew. I am super excited to be talking about this topic today, and really thank you so much to eLearning Brothers for allowing me this platform to do this. This is something that I have had a lot of passion in for years, as far as just generation gaps and how people's backgrounds and the way that they grew up affects the way they do anything in life. And so going into learning and development, figuring out how that affects the way that they learn and how adults like to learn has been something that I have been researching and speaking on for a couple years now. So hopefully you learned something from this today, and you enjoy it as much as I do. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. So as of last year, we officially had 5 distinct generations in the workforce. This was the first time in US history that a mix of this much variety has existed in the workplace. So just think about that for a moment, just take a minute. 5 very different, distinct, unique learning styles, 5 distinct individuals shaped by hundreds of characteristics, all that inform how they learn and take in information. 5 different levels of technology savviness, 5 different feels about collaboration, siloed learning, feelings around manuals versus e-learning versus instructor-led training. And within these generations are a variety of even more factors contributing to how an individual is learning. So today we're going to take a look at the challenges we face around this, the generations we're creating the training for, and how we can be sure that we are appealing to a multi-generational audience. So first, we're going to do a quick poll. I want you guys to think about your own content and how you feel about it without even going into any of these details, really thinking about the content that you're creating or that your company is creating and how you feel about it right now. And I think Andrew's going to launch the poll.
Yep, so that poll is there on the screen. You can click right on it, right on the screen. Tell us what you think. Is it the bee's knees? Is it just awesome? Are you feeling semi-confident? Maybe the straight mouth emoji where you're doing an okay job. Or maybe you're thinking, okay, we kind of just have one program, we put everybody through it the same way, and I'm not sure about the different learning styles. So go ahead and vote. There's a good chunk of you that have already participated. We'll give you guys a couple more seconds. Maybe 3 more seconds. How about that? Put a timer on it. 3, 2, 1. All right, I'll close that. And Andrea, I'll just read the results here. 51% of the audience is giving the straight mouth emoji. I think you're doing an okay job. 37% says that they feel semi-confident. They know that they cover 70% of the styles. 8% are In the are there different learning styles, and 3% have just the bee's knees. They teach all learning styles in their training. So we've got most people just looking for a way to get a little bit better, to improve.
Awesome, great. Well, and that's the thing. This is the first step of really figuring out if you have a problem or not, right? Is being honest with yourself, being honest with yourself when you really think about your own content or the content of your learning company. And this is actually one of the biggest pitfalls that you can get into when you're creating learning, is thinking that your content is great and never questioning if that is actually true, never going back and evaluating and doing analysis on that. So do you think that you have the variety in place to reach every learning style in your organization? Well, the problem is, as we just talked about, within these 5 generations working side by side, we have to provide them a variety of training in order to engage them all. And with that being so new in the workplace, is the training that we have created years ago really going to be speaking to these individuals? Each of these generations is shaped by unique characteristics on how they learn. As these generations work side by side, they're starting to blend more in what they prefer in a learning program. We're starting to see some of these generations kind of blending over and bleeding over as they work with different generations. And like I said, most of this content we created years ago, it just doesn't speak to even half, if not more, of the population that is now coming into our companies. A 500-page manual for onboarding just won't do. And I know that probably several of you out there have had that experience where you get to your desk at a new job and there's a manual or a workbook or something, and it's like, read this and then we're going to be ready to go. And that just won't do anymore. The learning industry and technology are constantly changing and shifting to keep up with trends. And that means that we, as learning professionals, also need to change and shift to keep up at the same time. We cannot stay stagnant, and we cannot allow our content to become stagnant. So next, what we're going to do, so we've kind of looked at some of the challenges. I want to go in and look a little bit deeper at the different generations and their learning characteristics, and then we'll get into the solutions to the challenges that we're facing. And before I get into the players here, I want to put out a very big disclaimer here that this webinar, this presentation is not meant at all to be ageist or biased against any generation. This exercise is truly to become aware of the differences so that we can better understand what drives and motivates our learners. And in the end, we can make better content for them. The times we grew up in shape who we are and how we learn. So keep in mind that the generations that I'm showing you and the years that they cover can differ depending on the culture you're in, the country you're in. What I'm going to be showing you is really kind of general overview of what we see in the United States. So here are the players. These are the 5 generations currently in our workforce right now. So we have, from left to right, we have Gen Z, Millennials or Generation Y, Gen X, Baby Boomers, and Traditionalists. So we're going to take a deep dive into each one of these generations and take a look at some of their characteristics. Again, overarching, obviously there are more characteristics that make up these different generations, and you will find that, as anything else, not everyone's going to fit neatly and nicely into each one of these little packages. So there's going to be people that span multiple generations or have characteristics of a completely generation. But I just want to give you an overview look of how each one of these generations is shaped. So first, we're going to look at traditionalists, born 1922 to 1945. They are characterized by being hardworking, determined, loyal employees. They respect authority. They are traditional in the way that they like to learn, and they have high work ethic and reliability. So this generation, it's also, you hear it sometimes referred to as the silent generation. And normally where you're going to see a lot of individuals in this audience is either retirement postponed, so individuals that have decided to stay in the workforce longer, or retirees coming back into the workforce to train up new generations, to be mentors and to be coaches. As far as making content for this audience is making sure the content is really to the point and following traditional norms and is respectful and a bit more formal in tone. So the type of content we make in tone for this generation is going to look a little bit different than what we would maybe do for millennials, and we'll see that kind of later. Should provide an option to have manuals or a workbook or job aids, something that can be printed out, marked on, interacted with. Traditional classroom training is typically desired for this audience, but if you do have as your main form of learning in your company online learning, and you find that you do have a high amount of individuals in this audience in your workforce, making sure that that content is easily accessible and has a really great intuitive learner experience. They're pretty low on interaction or group work, so providing individual assignments that can be completed on their own and shared back with the group is very valuable here. And one of the biggest things with this generation, and we'll see that kind of melding in with other generations, is that this generation provides great more mentorship and sharing of their expertise and experience. This audience has gone through it. They are not operating from, a book that they got in their master's degree. They have made the mistakes. They have gone out and gotten the experience. And so allowing this generation to come back and be mentors and coaches and help people through those hard times is a really great way and is a win-win for this learning style, as well as learning styles we'll see going forward, some of the later generations. And it's also, pretty low overhead for your department. It doesn't really cost monetarily anything to get that in place. It takes time, but then as soon as you get those mentorships and those coaching set up, they're invaluable to your company and to the individuals that are going through them. So let's take a look at the baby boomer generation, 1946 to 1964, characterized by strong work ethic, independent and self-assured, competitive, goal-centric, resourceful, focused, and team-oriented. So like I said, this group is very goal-centric. So making sure that your content has strong learning objectives and that they have access to those learning objectives up front is very important. And depending on the type of content that you are creating, building in a goal section would be helpful and motivational for this group. So providing content that is relevant to their job and can be applied on the job is also very important. That piece is big for pretty much every generation, where they need to understand the WIFM, the what's in it for me of the content that you're putting out there. How is it relevant to them? Why does it matter to them? Why should they be taking your course? They're also independent, but they like being part of a team. So that, coupled with their competitive drive, makes a team structured gamification strategy very successful. Something where they can be on a team and contributing to the greater good to reach a team goal, but still being able to contribute independently. This generation and this audience is also totally fine sitting down, barreling through hours of videos or day-long boot camps. This type of learning does not dissuade this audience. They're also very resourceful and focused, so providing extra learning resources like links or videos, blogs, webinars, just anything they could do outside of class is also really appreciated. So I'm going to take a quick pause of going through the generations, and I just wanted to get a feel from the group who is on the call right now. I wanted to get an idea of what your learning experience was when you were growing up in your primary learning. So we have two pictures. A is rows back to back, and B are like collaboration pods or learning pods. So we're going to launch a poll, and I want you guys to choose A or B. C is a mix of both, or D is other.
So that information is there on the screen now. You can click directly on the screen. Let us know if you, if your experience in primary school was a row of desks or collaborative pods or a mix of them both, or maybe something else.
Yeah. Online learning, maybe.
Online learning for primary school, yeah. Or, I don't know, outside, sitting in circles on the grass, or I don't know, something else.
Or at home. I know a lot of people that have been homeschooled that also, have a completely different experience.
That's true. Homeschool would fit solidly under the other.
Yep.
Unless at home you were in a collaborative pod.
Exactly. Or in rows. You never know.
Or in rows. That's right. That's possible. All right. I will close this out and put out the information. So 61% said rows of desks and 36% said a mix of them both. There were only 3% that did collaborative pods primarily. So interesting group here.
That's interesting. Great. Awesome. So what I'm trying to show here is that the way that we were taught to learn, and when we were going through primary school, we were being taught how to learn, What we could and could not do when we were in primary school shaped how we still like to learn as adults. Think about, again, the way that you learned. If you sat in rows, one desk behind the other, asked to complete your work independently, even getting in trouble at times if you did speak up or talk to someone next to you. Keep quiet, do your work. Only share when your teacher says it's okay. And then there's that other group of individuals, like my children going through class right now, who they work in a classroom that has pods of desks. Collaboration is part of every single thing that they do in learning. They're encouraged to speak with their classmates in learning pods and come to answers together and brainstorm and problem solve as a group. So this is something to keep in mind as we go through these generational differences, is that the way that we were taught to learn really does and has shaped the way that a lot of us like to still learn as adults. Great, so let's go into Gen X, 1965 to 1981. This group is individualistic, flexible. They have a strong work-life balance, or they want to have a strong work-life balance, technically adept, skeptical, motivated, and pragmatic. And this generation is the generation I fall into, and I will have to say, just from a personal standpoint, I am 100%. This is my learning style. This generation likes to learn independently and is somewhat averse to group work. And I know that anytime that I get in a situation, in a corporate learning situation, where I'm asked to, go sit in a collaborative group and brainstorm and come up with ideas and then go and present in front of the class, as an adult, it still makes me extremely anxious. And I attribute this to the way that I was taught to learn when I was younger. This group really provides, or they prefer self-directed learning with lots of activities and hands-on time. So that ability to apply the learnings and the concepts that they are ingesting from your learning in a working session is important, whether it be an ILT course or an e-learning course. This generation also really likes immediate feedback so that they know what is working and what is not, so that they can course correct very quickly. So providing knowledge checks often along the way, whether it be again in e-learning or even in instructor-led, is a really great way to keep them on course. So being able to quickly tell them, yes, you're on the right track, or no, you didn't get that, and then let them go and be on their way. Similar to baby boomers, provide ability to contribute to the greater good of the team in an individual way. This can bring motivation, so this gamification aspect can bring motivation to the training and make them still feel like they're making an impact. And I just want to kind of make a quick note. When I speak about gamification, I know sometimes individuals get like these blown out ideas of what gamification is, and it can be very simple things that you can actually add into your learning to motivate these individuals. It doesn't have to be a full-blown, gamification points and all that in your learning platform. So keep that in mind as well. So next we're going to talk about Gen Y, or millennials, as we most commonly refer to this generation, 1982 to 1997. This, and I want to make sure that you guys really grab and grasp these concepts heavily, especially with this generation. And I'll tell you why in just a second. So they're very tech savvy. Again, there is a heavy work-life balance with this generation. They're very family-centric, achievement-oriented, team-oriented. They crave feedback and guidance, and I'm going to stress crave there because it is the truth. Hands-on and interactive and meaningful work. So this is the generation that you're going to find was most typically in the learning pods and learned in a collaborative environment. And this generation is also the fastest growing generation in the workplace. And so you will see more and more and more individuals within your workplaces that fall into this audience. Because they are so tech savvy, content must be in the format that meets Gen Y where they are comfortable, and that is on their devices. The user experience is just as important as the content itself for this audience. And in fact, at times it can be even more important, which I know is painful for a lot of us IDs, but it is the truth that that learner experience is so important to their adoption. You want to make sure that you make time if you're doing classroom learning in classrooms as well as online to provide feedback. That feedback is huge. They want to know how they're doing, how they can improve, where they can improve, where they're missing, where they have gaps. Setting up mentoring programs and coaching programs is huge. This generation is being found to actually go out and seek coaching and mentoring a lot more than other generations have. And so being able to provide that internally as an education benefit is a great way to keep this generation motivated. And so if you find that you have a company, and I'm going to take real estate as an example, where you have, you know, people in the traditionalists, so people that are retirement postponed, they're still going out, they're still selling houses, they've been doing it for years. And then you have a group of millennials that are coming in new to it and are trying to learn. Having a mentorship program for those individuals is an awesome way to, again, feed both of those learning styles. You also need to take their need for collaboration and interaction into account when in group settings. This generation has been taught, again, more so in those collaborative classrooms. So they need activities, brainstorming works really well with this group. Providing space and time to problem solve together, share ideas, express opinions, you know, have arguments about stuff. That is really where that learning takes place for them. They're achievement oriented, so gamification is also very motivating. And like, you know, most other generations as well, any audience you're going to come across, they need to know that the learning is going to be very meaningful to what they are doing. And again, we're going to discuss that a little bit more, but having something that shows how this is meaningful to their day-to-day is really important to their adoption. Like on-the-job activities that they can go ahead and take an activity and apply it while they're on the job is highly valuable. You know, being able to do that in real life scenarios. Again, with this group, if you don't give them the WIFM, if they can't grasp what that is up front, it's going to be very hard to get their adoption. And lastly, our fifth generation here is Gen Z. So this is after 1997. This is the newest generation that's coming into our workforce. Again, just started coming into our workforce in the past couple of years, but this is also a highly growing generation, and we're going to be seeing more and more Gen Zers into our workplace. So being able to really understand what motivates them is also going to be extremely important. They're characterized by technology. This group is highly technical in the way that they like to learn. They prefer online communication versus face-to-face. They're very visual learners. Obviously put that together with the technology. They're independent. They have short attention spans, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean that they like to have content and get to the next piece, content and then get to the next piece, and then multitaskers. So like I said, this group is very highly technical. If you think about it, this generation is really the first generation that doesn't know life without technology, that doesn't know life without mobile phones and social media, and being able to have everything you want at your hand. So this really has shaped how they learn and how they take in information, and we have to take this into account as we build out our learning programs, especially if we're building out e-learning for this group. They prefer online communication versus face-to-face communication or face-to-face learning. So making sure that you have this option for these learners is really important. And if you're a company that is geared towards more instructor-led training in a classroom, having some type, and you're starting to onboard a bunch of individuals from this audience, you want to have some type of mobile interaction option in that course, or being able to have you know, a track that is online where maybe they get the concepts via mobile and, you know, kind of at a self-paced, and then they're able to apply those concepts in working sessions in a classroom. Again, this group is very visual learners and very independent because they've grown up in the cell phone age, and they ingest content very rapidly and in very small pieces. So micro learnings are very, that are easy to access from their mobile phones are really important for this audience. Then again, they're light on collaboration with other teams, very similar to Gen X in the way that they like to kind of work and do things. So I wanted to quickly do a reflection with the group. Normally I would get into a group, even though it makes me anxious, and do collaboration and kind of talk through these questions as a group and come up with them and then share. But since we're online, I want to do a reflection. And I want you guys to reflect on these 3 questions. So first, we're going to talk about who is your audience. And I don't mean, you know, what industry they are, or if they're men or if they're women or whatever that looks like. I mean, from what we've just learned about today, do we know who our audience is? Do we have a large amount of individuals in Gen X in our group? And if not, if you don't know that, then go ahead and say, you know what, I actually don't know who my audience is. So let's go ahead and answer that question first. Just go ahead and place it into chat. Who is your audience?
Write that directly into the questions panel, and we'll see what we got here. As we're being, I can go first. So I know that we have a lot of millennials here at eLearning Brothers, but we also are, the majority of our team is the one right above that one.
The Gen X.
Yep, Gen Xers, and we might have a couple above that as well. We're starting to see the next generation join our team, which is exciting.
Awesome.
All right, so some of our audience, there's a lot of mixture of all ages and demographics, absolutely. So the larger your company, I think, the more likely you are to have a large span. One person says, we span 4 out of the 5 generations, no traditionals.
Okay.
Okay, this is a good one. This person says, my audience, regardless of my company, my audience is Gen Z. Which is cool. But a lot of people are pointing out that they have, as I'm looking through these, one person says, I'm at the FBI. There's a mix of Gen X, Y, and baby boomers.
Okay.
As I'm looking at these, it looks like there's generally 3 in each of these groups, a couple that have the full spread, but nobody has just one, which I think is echoing more of what you've said. You know, if there's 5 in the workforce, it's very unlikely that you're going to have just one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's interesting. For my clients, the main areas that I work in is cybersecurity and Salesforce. So those are kind of like my main areas. And both of those are spanning all 5 generations at this point. So especially the cyber, you know, we have a lot of individuals in the military that go into cyber after they're done in the military. And then you have a lot of new people coming up in cyber as well that are, you know, straight out of high school that are coming in and doing that. So that learning does have to be able to span all of that. So that's really interesting. Cool.
I like what this person's pointing out, that our group as a whole may be a widespread, but our particular audience may be just one. And that's being echoed out by somebody else that says, my company is boomers and traditionalists, but our students are Gen Z.
Yep. Okay. And is that, I guess, and obviously we can't really have the conversation, but if they can put it in, is that because the audience that they're building content for is just very specific to one department?
We'll let you guys put some of that in. I know that for those who are hiring, for example, just as an example, let's think about this, like Wendy's or something like that. They may be having a influx of a younger generation, and so they're going to be creating more of that targeted to a younger audience. But this person came out to say they're in an educational institution, which is great.
Got it. Cool.
Which is great. At a university, you know, your employees are likely going to be older than your customers or your students.
Yep, definitely. Awesome. All right, let's go on to the next reflection question. So I wanted, when you're thinking about the audience that you guys all just put down on there for me, what is one thing that you're doing really, really well right now in regards to this presentation, in regards to the generational differences in the ways that you're engaging and building this content? So one thing that you're doing really, really well that you're really proud of. Go ahead and share that in the chat.
This one may take a little bit longer for them to type out.
Yeah, that's okay.
This person says healthcare call center, dealing with all ages, experienced, non-degreed, and advanced degrees. So they're getting people, regardless of their generation location, their backgrounds and experience may be different.
Yep.
So yeah, looking at it from that way. I'm learning a lot about the FBI in here. That's cool.
That is awesome.
Okay, here's a glow. I provide meaningful e-learning or meaningful learning objectives and focus the content around those objectives.
Awesome.
It's great.
That's huge. And I will tell you, I'm sometimes shocked at how many places don't do that. So I love that you do that because it's so important for the learner experience.
Another one is I have strong visual contents.
Great.
Great visuals are good.
Yep.
Interactions with lots of visuals. My online courses include independent and collaborative assignments that are relevant to the targeted job role.
Cool.
Adding in blended approach such as video and online instead of it all being ILT or side-by-side coaching.
Good.
That's great. I think that's a good point. That the key isn't necessarily to make a custom learning course based on the generations that you have here. It's to have a mix, a blended experience so that you can speak to everybody, no matter their background, no matter where they learned, how they learned and things like that, but to have that blended span so that everybody can learn regardless of background.
Absolutely.
And you know, keep it fresh. That's something nice. It's good to get something shaken up. I go no more than 10 minutes without student interaction or engagement.
Great.
It's really good. Yeah, and more along these lines. Jobs and family services. We seek out feedback after each training. The responses are sent to the trainer immediately for implementation.
Awesome. Good. Again, another thing I see people not doing ever is evaluating their programs after the fact. They are completely missing the E in Addy and letting it sit. And like I said in the intro, don't let your content get stagnant. You have to keep it fresh, like Andrew was just saying.
Great. So yeah, we've got, I mean, I
Great.
can read these all day if you want me to
Yeah.
keep going.
Nope, let's talk through our grows. So I do want you guys just to reflect and on where potential challenges you might have in your org, or for the individuals that feel like maybe they're not making, making all of the different areas that you would like to. Where are some challenges you have, or places that you feel like you can grow a little bit based on the content that you have gotten here today? So far, we're not done yet.
A big one is infrastructure. Having an internet infrastructure.
Yeah.
Software, LMS challenges, not being able to effectively use AI or virtual reality. Convincing others to address generational differences. That's another big one. Yeah, like your disclaimer said at the beginning, a lot of this starts to sound like ageist and ageism, but the goal is not to say one is better than the other, or that we need to try to cater to one or the other, but rather that just focus that there's a wide spread, and we can make changes to make things a little bit easier or better.
Yep.
There's one person putting in, they're coming in so fast, it's pushing my notes off the screen. Okay, we have been very successful in the blended learning experience with online training in the post-COVID training world. Our organization will be trying to push to go back to ILT once we return to being in the office, even though part of our workforce will still be staying from home. We're fighting going backwards in our ability to do more training online, especially since results show it is working. Yes, I'm going to be speaking at the Utah ATD on this exact topic. There's that the unexpected science experiment has been done.
It is so true.
And
it is so true.
Realize that and grow.
That is one of my biggest clients. It's a cybersecurity education company here in Denver, and they were fully instructor-led, brick and mortar, go into the class, 5-month boot camp. And because of COVID, we had to switch quickly. And so we did, we put everything online, and we use this light board that's really cool with our instructors, and I put everything online. And we just realized, I just found out last week that that is now the new way. They're dumping real estate, and they are doing pretty much fully online learning now going forward, because it was so successful and because they're seeing their enrollment rates go up by so much. So yeah, COVID really has pushed something that I feel like was probably going to happen anyways, just at a much slower rate. But yeah, it's really interesting to see that.
Yeah. More people talking about infrastructure that doesn't support e-learning right now. We don't even have an LMS right now. If you don't have an LMS, I'm going to show you some stuff at the end. We're going to get into that stuff. I can hook you up with an LMS. Yeah, the challenge is making people trust technology. There's resistance to using technology. This person says the challenge is our older faculty don't like virtual training. The LMS software tech available on various platforms is a challenge to them. So yeah, I see that. I get that.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. And there's so much out there too. So finding one that fits to your needs and your what people want is also pretty challenging. Okay, good. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. There's so much good stuff in there. I would love to just sit and be able to talk to everybody about all of this. So I'm going to give all my contact information at the end of this, though. So if you do want to reach out and talk through anything, I would be more than happy to do that, because I love doing that. And I'm siloed right now, sitting in my house for a year. So, all right, let's move on and start talking about the solutions. So we've talked about the challenges, we've kind of voiced our challenges. So let's talk about the solutions and kind of ways that we can try and combat some of this. And I know that there's more than this, but let's talk through some of these. So the very first one there at the top is know your audience. This I can't express enough, and I'll be coming back to it often. But your audience is comprised of unique individuals from all walks of life. Baby boomers and millennials alike expect the same benefits from your online training courses. As such, appealing to a broad audience is one of the most common learning and development challenges. Different age groups, in addition to different age groups, you also have to consider different backgrounds, different experience levels, different cultures, different socioeconomic abilities, things happening, access issues, accessibility. So these are all things outside of generational characteristics that you have to take into account when you're building out content. In certain generations, you may feel are more comfortable with technology, while others may have a steeper learning curve. So if this is the case and you find that you are having a hard time getting individuals to adopt onto your technology, you could try and consider doing some online training tutorials or walkthroughs, like a Walk Me that kind of walks through how to do things. Those are things that your more technology savvy learners can turn off if they want to, but that can still stay on for any individuals that still feel like they need a little bit of assistance. Also providing very mobile-friendly online training resources to keep up with the younger generations who expect that responsive training content. I can't tell you how frustrating it is for me to get onto, really any mobile device or mobile app and it not work on mobile. It drives me insane when I have to go back to their full site. So really researching your audience and really knowing your audience. So taking into account some of the pieces of the generation in which they grew up in, right? The things that really shaped them growing up, but then also just the things that make them tick, and not just saying, oh, well, this is something that I like. This is going to give you a clear indication on what they need from online training experience. You're delivering content in an online, digestible, easy format. The next one is going to be content is not the only king. So you've always heard that content is king, and I'm not going to say that it's not. It still 100% holds true. If you don't have the right content with the right objectives, the right tone, the use cases, then you've missed the mark before you have even started. But content is no longer enough. And a lot of you guys kind of echoed that in the fact that you're building out really fantastic learner experiences. Are you delivering content up in a way that people are actually going to interact with it? We have to meet our learners where they learn, and generational characteristics definitely play a part in determining how this content needs to be served up. So like I've said already, if you have a large number of employee population that is part of the millennial generation, you're going to want content in small, digestible micro learnings that they can access on their mobile device. Adding in some type of gamification, social learning. So this is something we haven't talked about a lot today, is social learning and like crowdsourcing information and learning. If you have a population full of Gen X and baby boomers, you want to offer up the ability to easily self-pace with interaction and lots of hands-on application on what they're learning. So making sure that your learner experience is just as good as the content you're serving up is huge. I can't tell you how many times, again, that I've seen really amazing content not even interacted with because nobody could find it. Or when they did log in, they had to log in 3 or 4 different times. So there are little things like, having SSO set up so that they can, don't have to have a new login. I mean, there's little tiny things that sometimes will just make learners completely turn off. So having a really amazing, solid learner experience is now becoming just as important as the content that you're serving up. This next one is huge, and I actually don't think that we as learning individuals speak about it enough. I think that if you're in the HR department, you may hear a lot about personal bias, but I think that it's something that we need to be very cognizant of, is, you know, letting go of our own personal biases. So we have to, we have to remember that we are humans, part of, you know, our own generations. So we are going to have things about our own generation and the things that we have learned creeping into what we're building. And we don't want to let our own personal biases or the biases bleed into how we see learning for the individuals we're building for. We have to be open to creating new things, push our comfort level, study our audience, do what speaks and works for them and not just us. We can't put anybody into a box. And again, I know this looks today like we're, you know, putting little boxes around all these different generations, but really knowing that there are people that span multiple pieces of this, and there are individuals in a lot of these generations that, you know, are going to have, like I said, bleeding and blending of their learning styles because everybody's kind of starting to work together so much. I have an example that I wanted to talk through. I worked with an individual in the learning and development profession in a company, and she did not understand gamification, did not understand why we needed to use it as a motivation for people to learn or train. She wanted them to just go through their learning. Why do we have to put this gamification in to get them to motivated to go in and learn? They should want to be able, they should want to do that on their own. They should want to learn the content. So she didn't put any gamification in and ended up missing an entire huge population that we had coming into our company. We had a lot of the millennial generation coming into sales roles and you know, junior sales roles and whatnot, where gamification is a huge motivator. It's something that even, you know, me on a daily basis, I'm interacting with gamification all the time. When I order Starbucks and get points for it, when I'm, you know, after you take an Uber and you give somebody stars, that's all forms of gamification. So missing out on those little bits can really, you know, can really keep our learning programs from being the best that they can be and from being fully adopted. So making sure that we are being very aware of what our own personal biases are, and we all have them, and making sure that we're not letting those shape how we're going to build content for others. Because at the end of the day, we are building content for other people, not for ourselves. So one thing I want to do quickly, it's just quick, just think about it, and you can just type in a yes or put in your favorite emoji, is think of one personal bias that you have. If you can think of one, just go ahead and put a yes or an emoji in there, because I think it's extremely important to really start to think and become self-aware of what those personal biases are and how you can start to move past them, because they can really block some amazing creativity and keeping you from being able to create the things you need to for your audience.
The yeses are coming in.
Awesome.
Some winky faces and smiley faces as well.
I mean, like I said at the beginning, as a Gen Xer, you know, collaboration was something that I've never really been good at. I've never, it's never been something, maybe not that I'm not good at it, but it's something I'm not super comfortable with when I have to get in a group and really start talking through and sharing. So it's one thing that I always have to keep in mind when I'm building content for other people is I have to build it in. I have to have that. That's where people learn, is in those collaboration pieces. It works. So I have to make sure I'm continuing to do that as well.
Yes, I'm reminded of something we did at ELBX Live, which we've since transitioned to ELBX Online. It's the eLearning Brothers conference that we do every year, sometimes twice a year. Somebody said back in 2019, I think, that content is king, but the experience is emperor, if that's the case. So very, very interesting way to say, you know, I understand the content's important, but as long as the experience meets the needs of your audience, that's going to make a bigger difference It's going to make that content stick. And yes, lots of yeses and smiley faces coming in from the audience.
Awesome. Thank you guys for doing that. Okay, so let's keep moving on. Relevancy. So what's in it for them? We've talked about this a little bit, the what's in it for me, the with them. Why does your content matter to them? Why should they take your training? Why should they read your manual? Why should they watch your video? What is the intrinsic motivation? So what is motivating that individual, and how is your content going to benefit them? When creating content for a varied audience, it is important that you can distill the message down to the true value prop for that audience. This will give them motivation to take your training, and this is extremely important. And this, again, all of it goes back to knowing your audience, because if you don't know your audience well enough, you have no idea what that value prop is for them. So going along with this with them a bit is building out story-based content. So creating story-based content that speaks to your audience will help better engage them. Weaving a story throughout so that it lays the context and gives them examples on how they would apply this learning to their day-to-day. So I don't know if anybody builds out story-based learning, but this is such an easy way to lay a base of context that you don't have to do all up front, or that it takes them forever to do. They understand, oh, I see why I would have to do X, Y, and Z. And being able to do that over different levels. So I've built programs out before where I have the same story that weaves in and out through beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And they can see those skill sets growing and building, and then they can see in their head, that's how I'm going to use it. That's how I'm going to apply it. And then engaging in right size. So we've talked about this a little bit already, but it is important to make sure that your content, the content that you're creating, is in a format that is engaging to your audience. Going back to, again, the first bullet, know your audience. It's always going to be going back to that. If you don't know them, you can't do any of these other things. So what motivates them based on their characteristics? Creating content that is engaging to those learners is a sure way to make sure that they are successful. And I know that this seems silly that I'm even saying this, but if your learners are engaged with your content, they are more likely to ingest it and learn from it. And engaging content significantly raises those retention rates, which is really the whole goal, I would imagine, of most L&D, is you don't want your individual learners leaving your course or in an instructor-led course only retaining like that 30 or 40% knowledge. Where you know you're doing a really great job is when they're leaving and they're able to, 60, 70%, and they're applying it on the job, and they're doing amazing things with the content that you have put together. And then easy access. So again, we've talked a little bit about this as well, but your content, regardless of the format, the modality, has to be easy to access, plain and simple. And it's really going back to what Andrew just said about, the experience being the emperor. This is also something true for every generational characteristic, even more so if you're a highly technical company. So if you have some more non-technical audience that's unable to easily access your content, they're going to quickly become fatigued by a poor learner experience, and they will stop trying. I've seen it happen over and over again, where I will say, well, you should have learned that in your onboarding. Oh, I couldn't find it, or you know what, it wasn't easy to go through. I didn't go back, so I just ask people now. And that's a fail. That's a fail in my book. And even for the technically savvy generations, you must compete with highly engaging and easily accessible user experience on a number of apps and gadgets that they're using on a daily basis. So the ease in which your learner can find, access, and complete your content is paramount to the adoption of it. And then lastly, and Andrew actually touched on this before, but it's that variety and balance. So, it is basically looking at your content and making sure that you have a variety of learner experiences for the individuals going through your content. So it's not just video, it's not just a manual, it's not just an instructor-led training, it's not just a webinar. Like, you have a whole round learner experience for these individuals, so anybody coming in can find something that works for them and can pick up where they need to. So that is kind of a list of solutions. I know that there's more out there. But these are all things just to keep in mind as you're building for these different generations, so that you can start to kind of minimize the amount of gap that you have. So one last thing I wanted to put in here, this is a question I actually get a lot. And this is talking about budget. You know, what if I have no budget, or if I have a very small budget and I can't do this? And again, this is a full webinar on its own. That I've done a webinar on this before, but I wanted to pull out a few points that might help you kind of start thinking about how to do this if you have a smaller non-existent budget, or if you're a learning and development department of one. So the first one is overhaul existing content. So find the content you do have internally. You know, in lieu of training in the past, individuals in the company had to be training somehow. So they have videos, they have webinars, they have, you know, a training sheet, they have content. There's content internally. There's tribal knowledge that is put down on paper or in a webinar, in a PowerPoint, some way. So finding all of that content and then repurposing it, you know, breaking it out, chunking it out, and building it into some type of a program. Now, it might not look how you want it to, you know, at point Z, but you can definitely start to get there. And you start to do your proof of concept and prove it out, and it'll grow. There are free resources out there. So if you are one of those companies that is like, we don't have any budget this year for an LMS, but we need to put something out there, there are options, especially in the age of COVID. There were a lot of companies that kind of sprung up, and there's different things you can use. I used a free LMS last year, and it's working great for my client. And you know, that's what he wants still. So we're gonna stick with it. They're limited in features. They're limited, you know, a lot of times in how many people can access or how many courses you can build. But at least there's some free resources if you don't have any money to be able to put together that POC and really start to prove it out. And if you guys have any questions about any of these, I've used all of them, or any other ones, just let me know. Internal SMEs, so you partner with your internal subject matter experts. And I know oftentimes they're too busy to help, but those individuals, if they are labeled as a SME in your company, they have trained other individuals in your company. They have something. So get the information they have, ask for their learnings, have them review what you're doing if they don't have time to help you build. And then prove out your ROI. So I always tell companies and individuals that are trying to get their learning and development companies, you know, started and trying to get more budget, start small, start targeted with a, you know, a department or, you know, a group that you know needs this and know, you know, that you can provide value to, and prove out that ROI. Show how this is going to help them by putting together a POC and putting people through and showing, you know, those different things. And then that way you can try and get some future budget for a glow up. But that was just a little quick overview of things you can try and do. Again, if you have questions or you want to pick my brain on anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I promise I mean that. And lastly, before we get to questions, I really want to challenge you to go away from this webinar really thinking about your content and how effectively you are doing things right now, and really thinking about, again, the challenges and how you're going to solve those problems. So I want you to kind of take away these different questions, and I'm going to run through them just really quickly as it pertains to your audience and what you learned here today. And hopefully you learned at least one thing here today that you can take away and you can, you know, start to implement immediately. But how am I effectively serving the audience and learning styles? What do my learners really like? What do I need to improve? Why do I need to improve that? I ask why a lot. Always ask why until you can get to distill it down to the reason why you're doing something, because a lot of times people just do things to do things. What are some ways I can add in more engaging content based on my learner audience? And what are things I should avoid based on their learning styles? So if you go through this and you're like, I don't think I have enough data to effectively answer these questions, and that's a sure sign that you probably need to go back and do some evaluation and analysis and gather that data. I go back on all of my clients' programs I build for them, even if it's a year later, 2 years later, and I do evaluation. I gather the new data. I break that down into bucketed themes, because there are always themes. There's always 4 to 5 things that individuals are constantly saying that I'm always hearing. And then we decide, okay, what do we take and we go and we fix now. So, This again is the best way to make sure that you do not have a learning gap. It is truly to understand your audience and what makes them tick. So go away with that knowledge, go away with these questions, and feel free, if you are so inclined, to reach out to me and step through some of this stuff with me. I would love to hear from you on what you guys came up with and where you're finding challenges, or if you have any questions on, hey, I don't have the data, how do I start to attack that? And that is where we come to questions. My contact information is there on the left. I have my email, my website, and then you can also link with me on LinkedIn if you would like. I'm on there all the time. But I would love to thank you so much for coming to this webinar today. I hope you gained a little bit of knowledge leaving today.
Excellent. So we do have a couple questions coming in. Here's an interesting idea, and this person would like your insight on this. So have you ever done a training on a topic with a generationally mixed audience and asked the audience to reflect on how their generational difference affected their learning? I'm wondering if calling this out with the audience would help those who balk at gaming or dislike group work to understand why gaming and group work are part of the training. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so I've never done it specifically that one, but we have done it around more of the personality type stuff, where we actually talk through like the Myers-Briggs, and even when we get into EQ and EQI, we get into a group and we talk through exactly what you just said. What is one person seeing, and kind of seeing it from the different vantage points, and then that way the whole group gets a good look at why sometimes we do the things that we do. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think that you should absolutely do it if you have the audience to do that with.
Awesome. There's a question here. Do some styles or some activities, some learning activities work across all of them better than others? And I would argue that story and scenario-based training probably spreads really well across everybody, because all humans like stories.
Yep.
What are there other ones that spread across that you can think of?
Yeah, so the other thing that I have found that works really well, and again, you would need some type of a way to do this, but is the social learning aspect. So when you have learning happening, having some type of a forum where individuals can go on and discuss what their questions were, what their challenges were, and talk through, and that, especially if you're doing online, that gives that cohort something to be able to connect to, because the one thing that we all have is the want to socially connect with other individuals at some level while we're doing this. So the social learning has been really, really good. And I think that typically reflections also work really well across, even if people don't want to share necessarily, sitting and basically making space to reflect always helps. I've had individuals come when I've been at conferences and done this, and coming up, and they were maybe the quietest person in the class, and they'll come and say, hey, I really learned a lot. Like, I reflected and I wrote down a lot of the things that we were just talking about. So I would say those are some of the ones that span across all, and that most individuals are going to be comfortable with.
That's excellent. There's another thing here that says, what about learning paths? Do you want to talk about learning paths at all?
Yeah, so I actually build out learning paths often, especially if you have a platform that allows for a learning path online. It's great. Learning paths can also, so if you don't know what a learning path is, it's basically taking a collection of content and building out a path, that has basically a start and end. So if you have somebody that is onboarding into a support role, having a path of all the different, I look at them as like stepping stones that they need to go on to get from point A to point B. That can be a path. The other cool thing about paths which is why I love to learn them, is that they can easily be gamified. So you can build out some really cool gamifications around paths and brand them really well. One thing I didn't get into at all today was about like learning and development branding. And like really branding out your content and making it a product. So yes, perfect. Andrew has a little helper here for me. Thank you. I love it.
This is an example of a learning path. Each learner is unique. Even even if you have two people of the same generation, they may be coming from different backgrounds. So this isn't necessarily saying that we're not going to send one person to an ILT, but it could say that in the pre-assessment they know the content that's taught in the ILT, so they skip
Yep.
that part.
Yeah.
It's kind of a learning path, and again, it's about that experience and offering that customized experience. I'm going to jump to one other screen here and talk, because I had mentioned I'm going to talk about an LMS if you guys are looking for that kind of a solution. The Rockstar Learning Platform was built and designed around the understanding of learning paths and the idea that people want to learn content at their own pace, and many of them say that they learn best at the point of need. So making an LMS or a learning experience platform that puts that content, the relevant content, available at the point of need at a customized learning path for whatever your learner needs. All of that was built into the Rockstar Learning Platform. I'm not going to show you guys any of it today. We're out of time. But if you want to take a look at that, visit elearningbrothers.com, and there's a section called Manage Learning. There's another section called the Rockstar Learning Platform. Both of them are the same thing. You can also schedule a demo by sending an email to info@elearningbrothers.com. You can even grab a free trial and see how the Rockstar Learning Platform works inside of the free trial. Part of the trial, in fact, as soon as you log in, it has you take an assessment of what you're curious about and you're interested in, and then it delivers the content to you based on what you needed, which is just an example of following these learning paths. So by all means, check that out if you haven't already. Thank you, Andrea. This is very, very useful. I imagine you're going to be getting a lot of contacts on LinkedIn wanting to continue the conversation. And I also put the link to the Rockstar Learning the Rockstars community, if you guys want to continue the conversation there in the chat section. So thanks everybody. We'll see you guys next time, and we'll have to bring you back again, Andrea. This was fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was awesome. Have a great day, you guys.
See ya.